All right, with this video, we need to discuss one of the biggest decisions that we're going to have in your case. And that's if we can't get a deal worked out and if we're going to go to trial, do we want a bench trial or do we want a jury trial? The default setting is you're entitled to a jury trial unless you waive that right and you do a bench trial. That's the default setting. But we need to make sure that you understand what these are before we make that decision of what's going to be best for you in your case. So let's start off with a jury trial. Generally, my suggestion is to have a jury trial, but there's certain circumstances I don't, but I generally go with the jury trial. So the benefit of the jury trial is I only have to convince one juror. So for the prosecutor to convict you, they have to get it unanimous. It has to be all of them saying that you're guilty. I just have to get one that says that you're not. And then we move on and we win. So that's the perk of a jury trial. The downside to it is if you lose it, you tend to get the max penalty or closer to the max. And then it's also harder to schedule, it takes longer. And you got to remember, the vast majority of criminal cases settle. They end in a negotiated plea agreement. Judges know that. So what they do is they'll pick a week and they'll just stack 50 cases and say, here's your trial date. But giving a bunch of people the same trial date, knowing that they're all going to settle. We're constantly, we have trial scheduled, you got to get ready for it. Here it comes. No wait, we're delaying it 6 weeks. It's just like that nonstop. So it is harder to get it scheduled. It is harder to get it actually done. Now, when we talk about a bench trial, so we're giving up a right to the jury. So we're just in front of the judge, and the judge is going to decide whether you're innocent or guilty, and then the judge is going to decide the punishment if you're guilty. The drawback to this is, again, we get back to that whole coin toss thing. He's either going for you or against you. The benefit to it is if you lose the bench trial, you tend to get the minimum or closer to the minimum, but more often than not, they're going to find you guilty. And there's some judges around here, it's just pretty much a given that they're going to find you guilty. So about the only reason I would want to get away from a jury trial is if I think you're going to look bad in front of the jury for some reason or another, or depending upon what type of jury we think we might be in front of. But that's a discussion that we're going to have over whether you want a jury trial or a bench trial. Our default setting is almost always going to be that we're going to go jury trial. Since they can't schedule those as fast, it pushes the case out. And anytime we're talking about defending a case, a delay is generally good. If we jump in too early and say we'll do a bench trial, they can schedule it really fast and then we get pushed into it quicker than what we're after. We get that situation a lot. I understand you want to get this behind you, you want it out of your life, and you want it over, but it's not something that we just want to rush into just to get it out of the way. A lot of lawyers don't take the time to sit down and explain this difference between the two types of trials. We want you to be thinking about it earlier, making an honest assessment of yourself. When we think about a jury, this is 12 people that don't know anything about you, and then they're going to be sitting there in the cold environment of a courtroom looking at you and judging you. So we kind of have to make a hard assessment of what do you look like? What do you sound like? How do you portray to the jury? So it's, say we're over in White County, it's super conservative, it's big church area. If you're wanting to go in there with a bunch of nose rings and face tattoos, that might not work out the best. We also got to consider how do you look versus what you're charged with. So if you're charged with beating somebody up in a bad fight and you're a real big guy, 6'8", 250, how is that going to look compared to all that? These are all judgments that we're going to make, and that's sometimes some difficult conversations that I'll have. I've had to tell clients, you really just don't communicate very well. I understand, but you get real heated and kind of going way off course. That's not going to present very well. And then we're also having to decide on how is the rest of this evidence going to look. Because remember, you've lived this and you've got the context of how this all plays. But I'm sitting here going like, okay, how is a text message or an email or a doctor's report, how is it going to look in this cold environment of a courtroom? But that's a big decision that we'll be talking about and discussing. Absolutely have the right to a jury trial. You can give it up and do the bench trial if the circumstances would warrant it. But generally my default is if we're going to do it, let's do a jury trial. Thanks.